Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Cara Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Cara Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In podcast. In today's episode, we're tackling a critical aspect of childhood development that often doesn't get the attention it deserves: interoception, the ability to perceive the internal state of our bodies. In a world filled with distractions and overstimulation, it's crucial for kids to learn how to tune in to their own body signals. This awareness is key in managing emotions and building a strong, centered self. My guest today, Cara Koscinski, brings not just professional insight as an occupational therapist, but also personal experiences from homeschooling her autistic sons. Together, we will explore how excessive stimulation affects children and the role of interoception in emotional regulation and self-understanding. We'll also present Cara's invaluable resources: her book, Interoception: How I Feel Sensing the World from the Inside Out, and an engaging companion workbook aimed at parents and children, highlighting the importance of play-based learning in this area that's coming out soon. Understanding how children perceive and articulate their emotions, behaviors, and bodily cues is a journey that Cara and I are excited to embark with you today. By integrating sensory experiences and creating a supportive learning environment, we believe we can better support the emotional well-being of our children and enhance homeschooling practices. So let's peel back the layers of how our kids experience the world from the inside out and explore the wonders and complexities of interoception together. Thanks for being here. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In. Today I have Cara Koscinski, and this is the second thing that we've done together, which I absolutely am so grateful for. The first is in the Sensory Balanced Homeschool Focus Group, where she goes into really great detail about things like interoception, but also what that matters for our homeschools. Today, we're going to talk more just what is interoception and what should we be looking for as parents. So, Cara, can you start first with who you are and why you are an expert in this, who you are?
Well, I'm a longtime OT. I graduated in 1997 with my master's degree. So I've been at it a long time. I work with adults. And then I had these two boys of my own. And within the first 3 years of life, they were both diagnosed as autistic. So I had planned on being a grown up OT. And then I switched to pediatrics around 2003 just because of my kids. And then I decided to homeschool them. So I had a private practice and I did a lot of research, and I've since got my doctorate. But I felt, though, that in my work, something was missing. I knew about the senses. I knew about sight, sound, touch. Then there's, of course, we know proprioception and vestibular, the movement sense. But I really thought there was something else because my kids were struggling with pooping and peeing, which is a big thing, right? We have to be comfortable. So if we're constipated and we feel crummy, then we're not going to be able to learn. So I noticed they had toileting issues, hunger, thirst issues, identification of emotion issues, and they weren't able to say, when I say, how do you think that made me feel? They'll just look at me. And I felt like they weren't able to even understand how they were feeling. let alone how they make someone else feeling. So I started research and, I've been in peds a while and I thought there's something missing. So I found these articles and it was called interoception. And now it's becoming more of a it's not a buzzword anymore. It's a real
Right.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So research is growing by leaps and bounds on this topic. So it's exciting to understand, really, as I've done this for a few years now, it's just changed everything that I do with my own family, myself, and my families I'm working with.
So
So
you mentioned some about, pooping, peeing, hunger, thirst, emotion, right? So is that what, if someone is thinking, wait, that might be my child, are those kind of the first signals that you
I would
typically find your parents?
say, yeah, I think so. One of the biggest questions that I personally receive is regarding kids. A lot of times when we're going to a public school or a private school, they say your child needs to be toilet trained by
Mhm.
the time they enter both bowel and bladder, right? So I know with my own kids, we were wearing diapers up until 5 and 6 years old because pooping into the toilet was a huge struggle. Not only was it releasing of the bowels, but knowing when they had to do it. And this having a bowel movement into the diaper long after it's appropriate to do so has been a huge issue. And I still see it in the pediatric groups that I run that, we're saying something's going on here. And then it's the hunger and thirst. So I get a lot of families that'll say, my son doesn't understand when he's really full, or he never eats, he just doesn't seem hungry. The other big thing about it is knowing how the child doesn't really know how he or she's feeling.
Mhm.
So, having a meltdown and then coming back when the child's calm and the child doesn't know what happened or didn't
Right.
even see it coming. So, I think it's this lack of awareness of the body in general, which
Mhm.
is a huge red flag.
Mhm.
That's what I look for first.
Think tiredness too. And there's so many times that we not meaning to, but our kids start either getting hangry, right? So they're angry, or they have like the tired zoomies and they're crazy running around like they're all over the place. And then we label it as a negative thing. We're like, you're just really tired. And
Yeah.
then they start to see that as a negative thing because of the way that we're framing it. And so then they don't want to be tired because that means they have to be sent away, right? Or sent to bed or whatever.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and when you're tired, our kids, some of them aren't great sleepers anyway, right? I know at least my two sons weren't, and I know a lot of my, students now aren't good sleepers.
Mhm.
But the thing is that we are as a society label these behaviors as good and bad, and I kind of
Right.
just said good sleepers. It's not that they, they're good or bad. It's just that they're lacking the skills. So, to see what does tired feel like? And maybe when I feel tired, I might feel a little bit hungrier, or, the nervous system is also one of those big things, Sarah, that comes into play. So we know as therapists that when we are ready to digest our food and rest, this calming system called the parasympathetic nervous system is supposed to come in and release calming hormones and, help us to know that we're tired. And sometimes the body system just doesn't kick in, or the student or child doesn't recognize those feelings of sleep. And they may think, oh, I feel weird or different.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with this. So that's part of the thing, is not knowing what to do, not feeling the sensations or feeling them too much, and then not knowing what to
What
do
to do with
with,
them.
yeah, with those feelings. And that's got to be frustrating, I can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine. So for parents who are saying, yep, that's my kid. So what are their first steps? What do we do?
Yeah, so after we realize this, look it up and start to just kind of get familiar with the word. But interoception in general involves multiple, our whole body really, but the nerve endings for a lot of this are in our internal organs. So some of these things we're consciously aware of, like, hunger, thirst, when you really need to drink or use the toilet, for example, you know what to do. But some of them also are beyond our consciousness. unconscious control. So our heart rate, our sleep wake cycles, the breathing we're doing while we're sitting here talking. So looking at it, information kind of about your child and seeing where the issues are would be my first step, is saying, okay, I know we have trouble with, going from 0 to 5,000. What causes this
Right.
burst of energy? And so looking for patterns in a child's behavior would be my first step, is knowing where to begin, because there's nothing worse than getting like this big word of interoception and thinking, okay, my kid's struggling with this, but then what am I supposed to do?
What do I
So
do? Right.
what is the biggest thing that's impacting the comfort of your child and your home? Your cultural values and your family's values. So find what that is first, and then look for causes. Take some information. And I'm not a big data collector, like an ABA clinician or anything, but
Mhm.
I want to know
Yeah.
what's happening before my child, he acts this way at 10 o'clock every night. What's happening before? Or do we have a schedule for bedtime? So just kind of investigating and taking information down. And sometimes it's hard to do 7 days a week, right, Sarah? We that's so much to do. So even just maybe 3 out of those 7 days a week, or 4, just to start looking for patterns would be my
I
my
love that.
first
We
thing.
talk so much about being, a student of our students or a student of our children, right? So if we're observing them, and what you're saying in here is kind of being like a detective, like what is
Yeah.
happening before this activity or this, struggle point or this hardship for our child? What is
Mhm.
happening during it? And what you're saying here is not even just, I'm going to observe what their quote unquote behavior is, but I want to be observing their bodies. So things like
Yes.
when you were talking about, heart rate and breathing, are they breathing really deeply? Are they breathing really quickly? Hiccups has always been something, especially with one of my boys. I could always tell, like, overstimulated, really about to struggle because they would have hiccups.
That's interesting. Yeah, because that's just a body's response. That's
Mhm,
really neat that you say that, because as parents or caregivers, we know our kids the best.
mhm.
And that's the thing. We may not think much of it, but then looking for that and saying, oh my gosh, every
Yep.
time, he hiccups, this and this happens
Mhm,
afterwards.
mhm.
And the thing is about this interoception is that we all experience things subjectively.
Right.
So there's never any right or wrong, that we see. So maybe for me, hunger, I get cranky, but maybe for your student, there's no more attention span. So we have to kind of
Right.
look for how they show it. And the other thing that's interesting is, especially regarding homeschool, and I know because I homeschooled my kids too, that there's a pyramid that I always have, and I have it in my books and when I'm speaking. In the bottom of that pyramid is our sensory system, and we have to have a strong foundation. At the very tippy top of that pyramid, as you know, is the learning. So we have to feel
So much up
comfortable
there.
in
Mhm,
our skin before we can access learning anyway.
mhm.
So when there's a meltdown or some sort of, you see your child struggling or getting towards the stressed out side, that would be the time before maybe this meltdown happens, to
Mhm,
start saying, okay, wait a minute, I see these signs
mhm.
that my child's becoming kind of, the pyramid's like wobbling. We need to intervene right now with a snack or some, juice or something before we get to that full blown meltdown phase. And that would be the next step, is just to see what we can do to stop that full meltdown. Because once the child's in a meltdown, right, Sarah, it's a non-teachable moment. We can't
Right.
go in and say, didn't you get that algebra problem? We're feeling like our skin is crawling and we're going to puke, but yet we have to do algebra. So I'm guilty. I have done that to my sons and just thought, oh, they're just nervous or acting up. But really, I think kids do well when they
When
can,
they
right?
can. Mhm.
Yeah.
And I love the way that you mentioned that you feel things subjectively, and also thinking through language pieces of that. So when you were talking a little bit before about identifying emotion, so I'm going to give kind of two examples of this. Number one was, my son will often say he feels itchy, right? Like he'll just say, and I don't think he actually needs to scratch, right? But it almost feels like, to him, feels like his skin is falling off. It's like it's too
Yes.
much, you know? And then I have a client who will say she feels like she has chicken legs. And so the reason that I'm bringing these things up is that, are those emotions? No, but to them, they're really trying to explain like how their body is feeling at that point in time. Is your child constantly fearful or disruptive, or do they crave routine or seem overly sensitive? It might be time to consider the world of sensory processing. This world, it's confusing and it can be hard to pin down. But you are the best advocate for your child, and I know you're determined to be equipped with knowledge to help support your child. After all, you are here listening to the OT is in podcast. But there is more than this one sense, and I know you want more than anything for your child to experience peace and confidence so that they can thrive. The Sensory Balanced Focus Group combines the best of both worlds, the latest research and insights into sensory processing with tips, tools, and strategies to implement straight away into your homeschool, plus a community to work through it with. I hope you'll join the Sensory Balanced Homeschool Focus Group today. You can find it in the shop at homeschoolot.com, or more specifically, homeschoolot.com/shop/sensory-focus-group. Now, back to the show. So, have you found in your work that, labeling some of these emotions and being able to give descriptors, have you found a link to that as far as being able to help with interoception?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head for sure. Our kids, a lot of them struggle with verbal,
Mhm.
and they can describe things often the way that they're seeing them, right? A chicken leg is you look at it and it's thin and wobbly, and that is a description. And it's interesting once we give kids the language or help them to understand that they can put words to this, or if they're, not speaking, if they can put a picture to this of what this feels like. And that is the first step, though, in kind of saying, I feel like butterflies in my stomach, right? We kind of all know what that feels like, but
Right.
some kids don't. So we just assume that that just is a skill that comes with growing up. But for our kids, we have to look at a butterfly and maybe act like a butterfly and flutter and, watch videos of a butterfly. And then after the moment, or when you're in the moment, and that you see your child shaking or kind of looking around, maybe you think, is this a butterfly moment? We don't want to put words in our kids' mouths, but
Yeah.
again, we really need to help them to get this language so that they're able to name it. And then they think, oh, okay, so the butterfly is associated with an emotion of
Yeah.
excitement or worry. And I think
Yeah.
that connection is really something that takes a lot of practice, right? So it's not something that comes automatically, but we can start to use those words in the moment. So
I love the
butterfly, or
way, yeah, that you're pulling in, using language, but you're tuning into all of those other senses. So maybe we're gonna, move our bodies like it, or we might
yeah.
see it or watch a video or maybe hear what a sound of that would be. Butterflies are pretty
Mhm.
silent, but something else.
Right, you've got it.
Um,
Yeah. So, yeah, a loud animal. When the child feels angry, we could pull a loud animal, or a Mozart song with some beats, or,
yeah,
using your child's interest is going to be key. And that's what we call, as you know, the strengths-based approach is
yeah,
incorporating your student's interest. And that's the other thing. And that's the beauty of homeschool, right? That we can do that. And we can do that in this work of intro too, if we're saying, okay, we're really loving, a Pokemon, and Pokemon is one of my favorite because at least my two boys they're still trading in my older son's 24, but
love that.
he understands that, and we use that language still, this feels like fire type, or, it's interesting that he
Mhm.
still uses that verbiage, but it makes sense to him.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So once we've talked about, we're going to observe, we are going to try to notice these things that we can get and more intervene before, things become chaotic,
Yes.
and thinking through being able to give language to try to help. Do
Right.
you find that interoception is a easy thing to help our kids with, medium, hard, where do you think?
I think that it's getting easier the more we learn. I think that it was hard at first because there's some big words. So, when I first wrote my book about interoception, which I decided that, this was something that was going to be something, it was new,
Mhm.
to us as clinicians and families at the time. But, I started with making our body organs friendly. So still in this book, and then there's going to be a companion workbook that's going to come out,
Ooh.
but, I named the organs to try to make it fun. But really, if you think about it, when as clinicians, we dissected a human body, and
Mhm.
that can be quite intense. And, it's not a inside, it's a kind of like the organ. You think of your liver. Well, then
Yeah.
what I did was, and you could do this too, is there's so much more clip out art now about organs and their
Yeah.
faces where like a, friendly intestine, and, it's not so gory, right? So, just kind of labeling body parts and start using the real words about them. So
Mhm.
heart, and feeling where the heart is and feeling the pulse. It is kind of tricky with some kids that are struggling because you can't see the organs
Right.
inside.
Mhm.
So using like these friendly, I call them biggie intestine and small intestine, biggie and smalls, but just kind of making them friendly to kids and showing them where they are in the body, and maybe even, tracing the child, outline and saying, where do you think your tummy is? And kind of just asking them to feel these parts of their body. But it is a little bit abstract, right?
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
feelings are hard for
Yeah.
all of us. So
Mhm.
it takes a lot of practice. And that's why we add games, because kids need these games, because play is a child's learning. So, we don't want to, although we're homeschoolers, we do want to make it educational. And that may be where we pull in our science lesson, right? So
Yeah.
we may make this about, oh, the stomach, when you start to eat, you start salivating. So
Mhm.
your mouth gets wet, and that feels, how does that feel? Sticky. And what is spit? Just kind of going that way and
See,
making it into a
I feel
science
like
lesson.
you have pulled in science, you pulled in language arts because we're labeling with adjectives. I mean, so really, if this is something that your kiddo is, really working through, you you've got to up your whole homeschool days. How many do you have? We're counting them up, and now we're done.
That's right. The
Now
what
it's
do
down to
they? What
math.
happens? The best plans we have get changed with homeschooling, and that's what's
Right.
the best thing about it, is that we let our kids lead us, so to speak.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's a difficult thing though. So I don't want families, caregivers, to become frustrated
Right.
when we don't get it in 1 or 2 days. It's taken researchers a long time to fully
Mhm.
understand it. The other thing that's important to know, I wanted to share just quickly here, is that the part of the brain where interoception is housed is very deep in the brain, and it's actually closely associated with our emotional system. So that's why when we think of a certain smell, like maybe cinnamon at the holidays, it's associated with emotions for us. So we have to understand that there's a lot of emotions around the way we feel in
Mhm.
our bodies that make us either comfortable or uncomfortable, and sometimes even tell us something's dangerous. So we can use it in safety also. Just saying, how do you know something feels like it's not a good choice? And that's
Yeah.
how you can pull interoception in as well, is thinking about how it guides our whole decision making process. That's pretty interesting too.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Mhm.
And another link to a sense that genetically, even I've been reading some about, is the link to proprioception and interoception. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's so many new things coming, linking these body systems, but specifically proprioceptive input. We know that when we give a child heavy work, so we're asking them not to lift, not to lift 50-pound weights, but just pushing, pulling, lifting, and carrying, can actually be calming. And the calming hormones that are released actually have a whole effect on the body in general. So when we add proprioceptive input and activities, we can see an overall calming in the body, and that lasts 2 to 4 hours into our body. So that's a long time that can kind of impact our sensory system. And, our receptors for proprioception are found deep within our muscles. And also for interoception, we have the deep receptors as well. So they're sometimes processed with linking to emotions, and they release feel good hormones. So it's really about the hormones that are released that links the two so much. And there's so much more that we all
Yeah.
can learn. And, I just think, especially with proprioceptive, though, if you think about when kids are feeling calm, they're able to take deeper breaths, which increases the
Mm-hmm.
oxygen in the brain. It allows the heart rate to decrease. So physiological changes can really be made through muscular
Yeah,
work.
right.
Neat.
And then calling their attention back to it as we've been talking some about my son, but actually so that's been my middle son primarily that, we've gone through a lot of this work with, but actually
Yeah.
my youngest son recently, and he's 8, and this kiddo loves some Minecraft, loves some Fortnite, doesn't quite recognize what that does to his body. And he's bouncing, he's going up and down as he's playing his video games or whatever, and then he comes upstairs and he's, for lack of a better word, he's a big jerk. And we've had to kind of talk through how when he's more sedentary, how he's not as in tune to what his body is, and then how
Right.
that changes and affects us and his interactions with us. So my main point with that is just thinking about how externally can really also affect us internally, and being able to call
Yes.
our children's attention to that. have I know there's so much research out there about screens, and sometimes people are saying no, screens are
Yes.
great, sometimes people are saying screens are not great, and it's hard for us to know, and to because everything can be contradictory, right?
Sure.
In your research, have you found any links, anything in regards to interoception and screens?
That's interesting you asked that. Right now, we didn't talk about this before,
Mhm.
any of this. So this is great because we're really having an authentic discussion. I
Yeah.
just read yesterday an article about it because I'm working on a book about executive function and interoception,
Mhm.
kind of the connection. But it was interesting because it said that our brains are, when we're gaming,
Mhm.
we are, of course, sedentary, but we're also stimulated. So it's
Yeah.
not a physical stimulation like jumping on a trampoline or running a marathon. We're sedentary, so our body's sitting, but our brain is stimulated in such a way that it's releasing all of these
Mhm.
hormones that are stress producing because it's keeping a level of excitement. And our brain, oddly enough, is not supposed to have that much excitement for that prolonged of a period.
Without
So
movement.
when we
Mhm.
have an addiction to video games, there's so much of these stress producing and stimulating hormones that we really don't have enough time to process what we've taken in. And then because there's no downtime, our body gets revved up,
Mhm.
and there's an incongruency. So what's happening in our brain is fast, 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 but our body's been sitting there. So it's
Yeah.
just this need to kind of be, all over the place, scattered, and
Right.
it's just doesn't match. And it's uncomfortable, I think, for kids,
Mhm. Mhm.
but they don't realize it's happening at the time.
Yeah.
So that was last night's article I read. I can't even, it was research from 2024. I don't know exactly who, wrote it, but it was pretty interesting
Yeah.
that, you think about it, our kids are stimulated so much more than we were.
Yep.
And, there definitely can be issues when we don't take breaks enough or limit it.
So fascinating. And if you
Yeah.
do come back across it, or if you can send it to me, I'll make sure to link it in
I
the
will.
show notes here as well.
Okay.
So this has been awesome. I think I was writing down some notes as we were going, just to kind of sum up and pull back at the end. But the main things that you were saying was to really be students of our own students, to be observing, but not just observing what we would outwardly see, but also looking at heart rate or other things that they are doing. And I
Mhm.
think that's also a really cool thing to talk about with our kids. If we go on a run, how does your heart rate feel now? If you're walking,
Right.
if you're sitting, can we check that at different points, to try
Mhm.
to get involved to stop a meltdown before it happens, whether that is providing language, whether that is providing deep
Yes.
pressure, but to work through and then use their interests to provide the language to help
Yes.
later on. So is there anything else that I missed that it would be, that you really want to leave our homeschool families with to help them to understand interoception a little bit more?
I think you did a fantastic
Thank
summarization,
you.
something I'm not good at. But the overall thing with it is that it can be overwhelming to add this big word. And I think it's really important that you can think of the ways that this is a kind of a typical thing, right? So it doesn't have to be this over and above topic, but
Right.
interoception is really, when you can explain it to kids this way, and this is when I start this work with families, what I often say is our whole goal here is to make learning comfortable and
Mm,
help us to be comfortable in our day. We don't have to change ourselves as much. It's just to learn how to make, ourselves more comfortable in learning.
yeah.
And I think that's what interoception is, and if someone doesn't understand it, because, we always have someone that says, well, this is a bunch of, hooey, just think about that and encourage, family or whoever's kind of not buying into this to say, give them some words, say like a tree. And they probably will think, okay, tree. But then maybe say, think about how you feel when it's the tree in your backyard where you grew up. And then
Yeah.
close your eyes and think about that. And what do you smell and what do you feel? So our memories and experiences are definitely tied to our interoception.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting, is that it really makes us who we are, and it's just more than a sense. It's the sense of self, and that's so important. You're going to give your kids a great gift to
Yeah.
help them build a stronger sense of self, for sure.
Ooh, I love that. And now your book is one of my most recommended resources. You want to, I should have gotten it down from my shelf, but I did not.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh,
I
you have
have it.
it.
I brought it. It's upside down. Here, the book is, I don't know if you could see it, but it's Interoception, How I Feel, Sensing the World from the Inside Out. And I, write all my books with strategies. So I don't want anyone to read the book and say, okay, great, now what do I do? So my
Right.
whole goal and everything I do is to say, this is what it is and this is what you can do now. The good thing is that this wasn't even planned, but there, for us to talk about this, but I just decided probably a month ago and finished writing last week a companion workbook
Oh,
to
so
this book.
great.
Yeah, I didn't even get to tell you.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people love these activities, but want more and more.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make a lot of the stuff play based,
Yeah.
because kids learn obviously through play. And some of the work, yeah, we want to feel our heart rate, but what can we do to get the heart rate up? And what are some other fun ideas? So the companion workbook will be out probably by July to it, but it's on Amazon or anywhere you can buy books. So
I love
yeah.
it. And I will make sure that we link that
Okay.
as well, especially the new
Thank you.
workbook. That's really exciting.
I've been wanting to do it for a long time, and I frankly am not good at PowerPoint, or not. What is it called?
Canva?
Photoshop.
Photoshop.
Photoshop. And the person that designed this cover, I had to re-employ her to put workbook here because I couldn't
Oh,
figure
that's
out how
so
to do it. That's what was holding me back, Sarah, all these years, was the fact that
Just
I'm
the
not
cover.
graphically inclined.
Oh, that's
So,
amazing. Know what we're great at. Good for
oh
you.
my God.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love
Well,
it. And
thank you for having me.
yeah, thank you so much for being here.
You're
Can you tell
welcome.
everyone else how to find you?
So yeah, I am in my website. You can Google my name, but it's Cara, Cara Koscinski, Koscinski.com. So some version of that will hopefully get you to my website, but you also can search Interoception, or but my name's, it'll be linked, I'm sure,
Yeah, yeah,
there.
it
I
absolutely
had
will be linked.
sold,
For
I
sure.
had a big company before, and for personal reasons, I sold it. So it's just my name right now,
Okay.
which isn't the easiest name, but it works.
Works, and we will make sure that people can find you. So thank you so much for
You're
sharing your work and your
welcome.
passion with this. And I'm hopefully helping homeschool families to learn a little bit more
Yes.
about their kiddos and what they can do.
Yes.
So
Yeah. And I think homeschoolers are the best. Obviously, I just my kids graduated homeschool. I can be done, right?
Yeah.
They're both graduated now, but I just give homeschoolers so much credit because really you're technically relearning everything for the good of your child. So it's my kudos to everyone
I
that
agree.
follows
I
you.
agree. It's
Yeah.
so good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all for listening to the OT is In podcast. For episodes 13 through 16, we've been discussing a lesser known sense, interoception. But some would say that it's actually the most important sense. It's the foundation for self-awareness. It's the ability to identify, access, understand, and respond to the patterns of our internal signals. And understanding this sense is also the basis for communicating about our emotions and our needs. To help start the conversation with your kids, I've created a really simple question guide, even with some hints for Gestalt language processors. So click on the show notes and it'll pop up for you. Thank you for being here. It's not lost on me that there are many places that you can spend your time, yet you're choosing to be here with me, Sarah Collins, from the Homeschool OT. I'll see you next week.